really critical. And there are ways, there are things that we do need to do to improve both the evidence base and the quality information that we're getting. So thanks for that. What we will do, Dino was caught up. Hopefully he might get here for the next session, but we'll have to run that. And if not, we'll certainly make his presentation available. The plan now was to just have a few minutes of questions in terms of the various presentations that you heard over the last hour as a bit of an open discussion. We'll just have a quick stretch after that, and we'll then jump into a small discussion groups. So, questions from the floor?
I guess mine's more a comment on the work that Geoffroy and his team have done in West Africa. I think it's a great example of what you can do with a coordinated program with a reasonable but still relatively modest budget. So in a period of about 5 or 6 years, Geoffroy, they've moved Central and West Africa from probably the lowest level of assessments across anywhere in the world to I think what's now the best. And maybe I can just ask Geoffroy if you can quickly give us a figure of what sort of budget and the process you used, how you built those, the teams and the leaders across the different countries, because I think that's a very instructive lesson we can learn from what you've done.
Sure. The budget was not so big. I think I couldn't get a figure here, but it's a few 100,000 euros. It's not more than that. So it's not big. Considering we have been working on 27, we could have been working on 27 countries. We have not done. At least 13 of them were considered directly, and of course we have worked with other things. And well, first there was a team, some of them are here, around. So, yeah, sure, we need to build a team, and that's one point which is very difficult, because even if it's not, and you know that it's not so difficult to do those assessments, what you need to learn is how to capture the data and how to interpret them, because you receive a lot of information coming from the ground, from a lot of people. I show you a little bit of information, but most of the time it's not, sometimes it's completely irrelevant. And you don't know the country, you don't know the park, you don't know the system, you don't know the context. So you have to make sure you're going to translate the information you get into a relevant information. And that's very difficult, because sometimes it's, as you said, in another language, another context, culturally it's completely different. So it can be challenging. I think that this process was not a question of money, but it's more a question of time and a question of finding the expertise in the countries and finding people who want to engage in the process, because you rely on people who are volunteers. And I'm very impressed by what you have been able to do in Parks Victoria, because we are far, far, far from that. And thank you for your comment, Margaret. I don't think it's true. We are very far from being able to show any true picture of the region. Even if we have started to draw it, sure, but it's not at this level of accuracy, data, information, and the way they use it. What we are still far behind you guys is what the people do with the assessment. That's really challenging, and I don't really know what to do. It's a question no more of management, but of governance. And what we have been doing there is management issues. And the problem is to go to governance, to go to decision makers, to go to policies. And that's what we have not been able to do, but hopefully we'll do that in the next 50 years or whatever. Okay?
Just from our perspective, I can guarantee you that there are two camps, there are two types of people out in the field. There are those that see this as just a reporting need, and I'll report to somebody if I have to. And there are an increasing number of people saying, I think there's something to this. I think I can use this. And so what we need to, we're needing to obviously get those people to be the salespeople for us rather than the others. I forgot to mention Jeff. Jeff, I'm just wondering if you might be able to just stand up or even come up and just talk briefly about your recent assessment for the South African parks.
Thanks. I'm afraid you're going to have to look at my agenda because I don't have a presentation. We did a quick assessment of our protected areas starting aim to finish in 2010 so that we could meet our obligations to the CBD at that last meeting that was held in Japan. So but we had two other objectives to that study as well. And the second one was to establish a national baseline, which we didn't have, and then to provide for national reporting. In effect, what we were going to do is use our minister in her reporting to Parliament and various committees, and certainly to our Treasury and things like that, to see if we could use this report to show how good or how bad we actually were. Okay, the methods we used the MET, which we adapted for South African conditions, which essentially meant we changed some of the language so that we could understand it a bit better. And then we did a bit of rearranging and put it into a spreadsheet that was automated. It was myself and a facilitator called Britain. We ran workshops around the country at each of our management authorities. Now, in South Africa, just to put you into context, South Africa is about the same size as Queensland. We've got 9 provinces there, each with their own management authority. And then we have 3 management authorities at national level. So we make things a bit complicated for ourselves. Paul and myself went around to each one of these management authorities and in some cases to groups of parks or individual parks, where we ran workshops on the methodology and what we were trying to do, and then handed it over to the managers themselves, where they did a self-evaluation exercise using the MET. And South Africans tend to be quite arrogant, but we're also very critical of ourselves and anything that we do. So it was quite interesting to see how the managers themselves assess themselves. And then, of course, when we got all the results back, Paul and I sat down and did a basic analysis. So there's the report that is there. I've put a couple of CVs out there. If anyone else would like to get copies, you can put your name down and I'll ensure that you do get copies sent to you. As far as the results went, we assessed some 220 of our protected areas, which included 1 special natural reserve, Prince Edward Islands, 19 national parks, 3 World Heritage Sites, and the rest were natural reserves, which included a number of our forest protected areas. The average score we got when we added everything up together and did a mean for it was 49% effective management. And this, to all of us, was a bit of a shock and a real wake-up call. Our national parks, fortunately, were above the 69%. And our national parks consist of over 50% of our protected area state. And our World Heritage Sites also were above the 70%. So the big and the hairy ones seem to be reasonably well managed, but certainly a lot of the others were very poorly managed. What happened after we presented these results? We had a CEOs forum, And at that forum, when we presented the results, we made a recommendation that we should try and aim to get to at least 68% by 2014, which is when we aim to do the next national assessment. This was agreed to and endorsed by our minister and the NECs, which is his equivalent at the provincial level. The political heads endorsed this target. And then the minister also undertook to report annually to the president as part of her outcomes as to the progress in improvement of our park management in South Africa. At the management authority level, the authorities for KwaZulu-Natal decided that they would set their target higher at 79% in the same period as a minimum standard, and they're working very hard towards that. And the Eastern Cape, another one of the provincial authorities, is having a quarterly report back on improvement towards that target as part of their work plan. One of the other provinces, in Mpumalanga, did a second assessment a year later, and they found that they were actually dropping in their scores. And they are in trouble, and they basically said, well, here's even more evidence, so please can you help it? So it is working in that sort of sense. The priority areas that we found that needed attention were management plans, or the lack of the management plans, and from that, the annual plan of operation or the business plans were definitely lacking. Maintenance of our infrastructure and our equipment was quite frighteningly bad, too shoddy. Human resource capacity was a big issue, and then the lack of a performance evaluation system also was raised as a thing. Law enforcement, what we probably all heard about the issues we had was rhinos at the moment. So that was raised out, and then right at the bottom of that list was our budget, which we thought that would probably be the highest problem, but not really. So if we can get some of those other things right, then we can probably get a lot of our management up to speed or improve it at least. So what have we done since then? We've set out or developed a couple of guidelines for declaring protected areas so that we make sure that all of our protected areas state is legally in the books, and we also did guidelines for management plans, and I've got also examples of those on CDs there if you'd like to have a copy of those too. At the same time, we are developing norms and standards for management, and these norms and standards are again another way of our managers being able to monitor the outputs of their efforts. That's where we're aiming to go. And then we also have having an independent group led by the Game Rangers Association of Africa to verify some of the sample of our parks, to go through them again and see if the scores are actually as low, or in fact are they actually high. To the criticisms that came up at the end of this whole assessment was the Met is not really good for doing comparisons, which it states right out in front, and we try to make that point all the way through it. But even so, it's human nature to stop doing comparisons. What's my park versus your park? And then the other thing about the Met is that it says you have a park or a protected area, you assess your management. It doesn't say how good is that park or how important is that park in terms of its biodiversity or for the whole estate. So we again going into look at some of our protected areas that were set up for for other reasons to see whether they should actually be in our state before we do our next assessment into 2040. Thanks very much.
So, are there any other questions for any of the other speakers this morning? Yes.
Hello, my name is Diane, and I'm working for Biosphere Reserve in Lebanon. I'm also doing a PhD about MEE focusing on the Arab region. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to focus on two of them. My first question is, I believe the CBD has pushed the requirement to 60% of protected areas having PAMI evaluations for 2015, and what I feel is that we are still struggling with the 30%. So I would like to ask the experts in the room, how do they think we can close this gap, and is it realistic really to be running this race for 60% while on a local level managers sometimes don't know the value yet of PAMI evaluation, or don't even have resources to conduct any. My other question is, being a junior researcher trying to start a certain similar evaluation for the Arab countries, I'm a bit confused because we have so many indicators and so many tools. How would you recommend starting to select appropriate indicators relative to a certain contextual region? Because I know in different regions and different PA types we have different tools that could be more appropriate. So how to go about selecting indicators when we want to conduct evaluations for a specific region? I don't know, these are general questions, so I don't know who would like to answer.
Probably somebody that helps set the target might ask the first one.
Yeah, okay, so in terms of the target, the reason the CBD lifted the target from 30% to 60%, I think was in recognition that progress towards that target, while it wasn't reached by 2010, was probably the best of any of the targets within the PALPA, so more progress had been made there than other areas, and countries saw it as something that was achievable in that time frame, particularly by defining it on the basis of area. So I would say focus on the most important protected areas first. So as we learned in the Korean case, where they only assessed a relatively small number of protected areas, they actually assessed the largest percentage, a large percentage of their protected area system. Or in the case of Victoria, 300 out of 2,000 protected areas, but not 90% or over 90% of the area. So I think focusing on which ones you develop the assessment systems for is probably the way. And these are things are global targets. We would love to see every country or every region meet them, but recognise that it will be variable. So, in relation to the selection of tools, yes, it is confusing, and there are many. It's a little worrying, I guess, that there are many tools that have only been used once, as far as we can see. So a lot in the report that Fiona and I and others did, we documented about 45 different assessment systems, Fiona, but maybe 20 of those have only been used once. I think you've got a choice. You can essentially it comes down to adopt, adapt, or develop. So you can adopt an existing system as it is, and people using the MET or RAPAM tended to do that. You can adapt, as we just heard from Jeff, where they took the MET system as the basis, but they then adapted it to meet their needs. And in the case of Korea and New South Wales and and Victoria and a lot of others, it's been a case of taking a system that looks like it meets most of your needs, but then going through and adapting that so that it fits the circumstance. Or you can develop from scratch, and I think that's probably the least necessary now. There's enough different models. You need to think about the purpose. You know, it doesn't need to be rapid. You want to do a much more intensive assessment on a few protected areas, in which case something like enhancing our heritage, you know, takes a lot more resources, but it's more detailed. So I think about the purpose and the audience, and then my guess is in most cases adapting will be the way to go. You know, pick the system that's closest, but make sure it fits the local needs. Because if it's not relevant, if managers look at it and think that doesn't apply to us, then they're not going to have much confidence in the results, and they're not going to be committed to using it. So I think this issue of making it relevant to local context is really important. But maybe Fee, you want to?
Now, my only other comment is finding places with some similar cultural or physical background that have done a study, for example, in Australia, adopting from another state, adapting it from another state works well. The big report that was done for Finland, then